All right, we are going to work practice exercise 6-5A. So in this chapter, chapter 6, we are learning how to calculate the inventories based on a periodic inventory system. And we have 3 different methods. So the first method is called FIFO, first in, first out. The second method is called LIFO, last in, first out. And the third method is weighted average. And we use these when, at the end of a period, we take a physical inventory and we count the inventory and we compare what we have left to what we know we purchased, and then we calculate the merchandise inventory, the number for the asset, how much inventory we have in stock, and the cost of merchandise sold, which is simply the inventory that we've purchased minus whatever we've sold. So we're going to calculate these two numbers, the merchandise inventory and the cost of merchandise sold, 3 different ways for a periodic inventory system. You may recall in chapter 5 we did perpetual inventory, and every time we did a sale we took it out of inventory. So this is slightly different. Under perpetual we don't do the inventory recordings as we go. We're just going to sit down at the end of the month and do this. So you just need to know how to calculate these 3 ways. First in, first out, last in, first out, weighted average cost. And these 2 problems I'm going to work will show you. I'll work practice exercise 6-5A first, then I'll do a separate video for the other problem that's similar. Alright, so what we've got going on here is this company has purchased inventory 3 different times during the year. They had 24 units to start with that they paid $135 a piece for. They purchased some and they bought 36 at $150, and then they purchased some more, 30 at $162. So clearly how we calculate inventory is going to affect our actual number for inventory and number for cost of goods sold, because the prices for these units changed a little bit during the course of the year. So in order to do our calculations, we need to understand how many units are left in the inventory so we can calculate what their value is based on one of these 3 methods. And once we know what the value in inventory is, we can just calculate cost of goods sold because we know how much we paid for everything. So we just subtract the inventory balance from the amount we paid for everything, and we know what our cost of merchandise sold is. So let's take a look at this. Determine cost of inventory under the periodic system using LIFO, FIFO, weighted average. Alright, so we're going to get the cost of the inventory. That means the inventory that's still sitting in the warehouse, what's the value of that? We need to total that up. So what information do we have? Well, we know what our beginning inventory was. We know what we purchased. So we know that over the whole year we've had 90 units available for sale. And we know how much we paid for them. So we know that at the end of the year, when we sit down to do inventory, we know that we paid $13,500 for all 90. Right? We paid different amounts for them depending on when we acquired them, but we know that it was $13,500 for all 90 units. And we know how much we paid for each batch that we bought. So let's go ahead and do the first in, first out method. So we're determining the inventory, the physical inventory. Alright. So if there's 23 units in there, then we need to know that first in, first out means the first ones that came in are the first ones that got sold. So if there's 23 left, we know that as we sold these 24 first because it's first in, first out. We know we sold these 36 because it's first in, first out. So we know that the 23 still sitting in the warehouse came from this batch, right? Because it's first in, first out, so these left, and these are still here except for the 7 that we sold. So first in, first out, 23 units. Units times what we paid for them, 162. 23 times 162 is 3726. And that's the answer. The 23 that are still in inventory came out of here. So they have to be 162 each, or a total of 3726. B. The next thing we want to do is LIFO method. So that means last in, first out. So we're kind of going the opposite. We know that of the units we sold all 30 of these. We just go backwards. So we're going to assume we sold the last ones that we bought first. Right? So we sold all 30 of these. We sold all 36 of these. And of these, we only sold one. So 23 units at 135 are what's still sitting in there. So for LIFO, 23 times 135 equals 3105. And that's the correct answer. So the 23 units we still have left cost 135 apiece for a total of 3105. Weighted average cost. A lot of times we write this as WAC. Alright, and it's nice, it's easy, it's just an weighted average cost, just like it sounds. So the mistake people make when they do weighted average cost is they'll add these three numbers. I bought 135, 150, and 162, so they'll add 135, 150, 162, divide it by 3, and come up with a number, and they'll say that's the weighted average cost, but that is not how you do it. Because it's weighted, you're weighting it by the number of units. So you have to take this, you have to take the total to get the weighted average cost. So to get the weighted average cost, we're going to add what we paid for these 24, and these 36, and these 30. So we know that all through the whole year, the total we spent was $13,500. And we know this totals up to 90 units. So the weighted average cost will be $13,500 divided by 90. That's 150. So that's the per unit, right? So now we know it was 150 per unit was the average cost. So now we just take our 23 times 150, and that gives us an average cost of $34.50. So this was a little bit different than these because we had to figure out the average cost per unit first. That's the only reason it was different. And then we just applied that same per unit cost and came up with our $34.50. So that's not hard. What if, now this is not part of the problem, but what if I said, okay, since you know what your inventory is, what is your cost of merchandise sold? Right? That expense that goes on the income statement. Well, we could figure that out pretty easily too. Let's just do that for each of these. The thing you need to know to get cost of merchandise sold is how much you paid for it minus what's left in inventory, right? Because cost of merchandise sold is simply equal to beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory, right? So we just calculated our ending inventory, right? We know that beginning inventory plus purchases equals $13,500, right? Here's our beginning inventory on January 1. Here's our purchases, and it totaled it for $13,500. So for each of these, for A, B, and C, all I have to do is take my 13,500 minus my 3726, my 13,500 minus 3105, or my 13,500 minus 3450, and that's going to equal my cost of merchandise sold for each of these. So 13,500 minus 3726 equals 97.74. So that is FIFO comms, right? And 13,500 minus 3105 equals 10,395. So that's LIFO comms, right? And then 13,500 minus 3450 equals 10050. And that's weighted average cost of merchandise sold. Alright, I think you can see it's not too difficult to calculate. Just keep a few things in mind, like FIFO means first in, first out. LIFO means last in, first out. WAC means weighted average cost. And once you know your ending inventory, if you know your beginning inventory plus purchases, you can just calculate your cost of merchandise sold. Alright, I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to go do a second video for exercise 613. Alright, good luck.